There's something you've been carrying without ever putting it into words. Not because you can't, because once it has words, it stops being flexible. Right now, it can still shift slightly, depending on how you look at it, depending on the day, depending on how tired you are. You notice it most in the quiet parts of the day, not during anything important, just when nothing is asking for you. It shows up as a pause you don't question, a hesitation that doesn't feel dramatic enough to investigate. You tell yourself it's just a thought passing through, but you recognize it. The way you recognize something you've seen many times without ever stopping for it. There were moments when you almost named it, not out loud, just internally. You felt the shape of the sentence forming. You knew how it would start, and you stopped there, not because the rest was unclear, because it wasn't. Finishing it would have made it solid, less deniable, harder to carry casually. So you let it stay incomplete. You've done that more than once. You've noticed how easy it is to move on from it once you don't finish the thought. You pick up something else, another task, another distraction that doesn't feel like avoidance because it isn't urgent. Sometimes you wonder how long it's been there. You don't try to answer that. Time feels too close to explanation. Instead, you notice patterns, how it appears in similar moments, how it waits until you're alone, how it never interrupts. It doesn't ask for attention. That's part of why it stays. You've never felt the need to tell anyone about it, not because it's private, because it doesn't feel shareable in the way other things are. You imagine saying it, just once, to see how it sounds outside your head. And then you imagine having to deal with the silence after. That's usually where you stop. You let the thought return to the place it came from, not buried, just unfinished. You don't feel relieved when you do that, but you don't feel unsettled either. It stays manageable as long as it remains unnamed. There are days when it feels closer to the surface, not louder, just nearer. On those days, you're more careful with your thinking. You steer around certain questions. You shorten sentences in your head. You move on faster than usual. You don't call this avoidance. You don't call it anything. Calling it something would mean it's real enough to define. And defining it would change how you sit with it. So you don't. You let it exist as something you already know but haven't acknowledged in a way that counts. You tell yourself you'll return to it later, when things are clearer, when you have more distance. You don't finish what later depends on. For now, it stays where it is. Not resolved, not denied, just there. And you let the thought end before it reaches the part that would make it stay. Silence.